We are very glad to have you here. President Laird, would you like to say a few words before we get started?
Very good. On behalf of the 100 Black men of Augusta, we'd like to welcome you to this Health Matters Town Hall meeting. I would like to thank our sponsor, the Morehouse School of Medicine. I'd like to thank the panelists, the moderator, and all of the athletes that are tuned in, and all of the persons that are also tuned in listening to this town hall meeting. I hope that the information that is given is informative. And I also like to last but least thank the committee that put this town hall meeting together. So, and all said, we'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Bennett.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our summit, our panel talk. We are so happy to have you all here. I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then I'll introduce the panel members and give them a chance to introduce themselves. So my name is Dr. Hannah Bennett. I am an assistant professor in kinesiology at Augusta University. I'm also the Faculty Senate Athletic Committee Chair. And we, as a committee, really wanted to highlight the necessity for addressing student athlete mental health. My educational background is focused in sport and exercise psychology. So I am a practicing consultant with performance psychology, but that does not qualify me to be a licensed clinical practitioner. And so we have two wonderful experts on the panel today that are going to address a lot of questions regarding the student athlete mental health aspect. And we also have two athletes, one former and one current. And we're gonna really have I think a really robust discussion about a topic that really is taboo in our society. So without further ado, I would like to let the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Dollinger.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you for participating tonight. I'm Dr. Robert Dollinger. I'm the Director of Student Health Services at Augusta University. I'm a practicing internal medicine physician, graduate at the University of Miami. I come with over 35 years of experience in college health, where I've dealt with student athletes in both Florida International University, Florida Atlantic University, and now at Augusta University. So I look forward to tonight's presentation and hope you find some valuable information that will help.
Wonderful, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Petrova.
Good evening, everyone. Such an honor to be here tonight. My name is Elena Petrova. I'm by trade a licensed psychologist, currently serving as the Director of Student Counseling and Psychological Services at Augusta University. And my entire career has been in collegiate mental health. Truly one of the things that I'm most passionate about is helping students and working with students. So truly honored to be here tonight and sort of help share any information that I can about this important topic.
Thank you so much for being here. And then we'll go over to Miss Jessica Hedrick.
Hey, I am Jessica Hedrick. I graduated from AU May 2020, and I played volleyball all 4 years here. And I'm originally from St. Louis, but I came down here for nursing school and to play volleyball. And now I work at Augusta University Medical Center in the shock trauma ICU. So.
Wonderful. Jessica, I feel like you're going to have some really great mental health tips when it comes to being a healthcare worker over this last year. So I'm looking forward to that. Mr. Thomas Lawless, have we located him? Is he with us?
We're still trying to locate him.
Okay, so I will just do a brief intro. So when we get him on, we can get going right with his. So Thomas Lawless is currently a junior at Augusta University. He is pursuing a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in sociology. He spent a great bit of his childhood in Atlanta, but is a true Augusta native. He graduated from Grovetown High School in 2017. He's a member of the track and field team here at Augusta. He is a self-proclaimed lover of all sports, with basketball and football being his top favorites. And he also loves meeting and connecting with new people. So hopefully we can get him on here without issue and allow him into this conversation. So we have a list of questions for our panelists, And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the topic, and then we will go into the questions. So our first topic is going to be focused on mental health as a whole for college students. And so to our experts, what do you consider to be the most important mental health issue facing college students right now?
I'll take that one, Hannah. Um, I would say that consistently for the past probably a decade or more, what we've seen in terms of what university students, college students present with, not just at Augusta University, but this is across the nation, across colleges and universities in the United States, is that the top presenting concern for college students is anxiety, as well as anxiety related disorders. So anxiety being sort of top concern, stress being the second one, and then depression being the third one. And then concerns related to relationships, family issues, they are sort of, in terms of sort of, if we were to rank order them, they sort of follow below. But the top consistently, I mean, we see data every year on this, that anxiety continues to remain um, as the top concern, and even certainly in the past year with the impact of the pandemic is certainly remained as the highest concern.
Now, have you seen an increase in the amount of students that have tried to utilize the psychological services here at the campus?
We always do. I'm going to frame the answer to this question to how do we take the pandemic into the equation, um, and and then some sort of national trends and some trends at Augusta University. So one thing that we have to remember is that Augusta University is growing in student enrollment, and we certainly experienced that fortunately this past year. We also had a pandemic, and even if we didn't, national trends demonstrate that every year university counseling centers tend to see more students that utilize services. So for us, all three of these variables came into place, and we saw an increase, certainly an increase in number of appointments. We saw more of an increase in number of appointments than we saw an increase in individual students. And I think that tells us that even the students that knew about us and were established sort of at student counseling were certainly utilizing very frequently our services.
So we do recognize that there are some students who elect not to use the mental health services that we have available on campuses and at institutions. So why do you think students often neglect their mental health?
Such a wonderful question. It's sort of as I think about it, I also thought about the times when I was a student, and sort of how I thought about mental health. And I think whether it's mental health, whether it's sort of our physical health, whether it's a sort of wellness altogether, even though there are some generational differences, it is just not something we oftentimes think about. And we don't often think about it until we start to feel unwell. And so I think it's sort of natural when we're at that age in our sort of late teens and early 20s to not always have mental health at the forefront until things get really, really rough. Couple of other pieces, and I know that there's a lot of research out there on this, is that also access to healthcare. I think not every young and emerging adult has equal access to healthcare, and obviously we've got wonderful resources on campus that our students have access to, and that's great. But we have to remember that young and emerging adults are, in the kind of most uninsured category. So even when it comes to kind of more, if they need some more, maybe more resources, even off campus, right? Sometimes it's the access to that resource that can be a difficulty. So, yeah, I think it's a multitude of factors. I think some of it is just also stigma. culturally, sort of how we talk and think. I mean, there's a reason why we have this event tonight, and hopefully one of the impacts that it has is that it continues to reduce stigma, not just for all of our students, but certainly for the student athletes in society. I feel like if it weren't for this pandemic, I mean, this pandemic has certainly made us talk about mental health, even though that was an important topic way before the pandemic happened. And so it's a variety of different factors, Hannah.
Yes, I feel like we could really expand on that question for the entire hour. But for the sake of time and wanting to meet Thomas, welcome Thomas. Sorry for the technical difficulties getting you on here. So Thomas, this question comes to you. So what are some mental health challenges you have faced or have seen your friends, either athlete or non-athlete, face just as a college student on campus?
First off, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My anxiety has been going through the roof like the past 10 minutes because I didn't think, I was like, man, I hope I can get logged in. I didn't know what was going on, but I'm glad it's all worked out. But just to answer your question, one thing that I have experienced that I think is very common for me and also people around me, I think one thing that I thought about immediately was burnout, which basically, is, exhaustion, whether it be like physically, mentally, or emotionally, or all three at the same time. And, I thought about it and I was like, well, that's pretty common because we're college students and we're doing a lot of things. Because even if you're not a college athlete, most students in college are working while going to school. And for many people, that right there is hard enough. Just having a job, sometimes a full-time job, and going to school. And so when you take it to an athlete's perspective, you're doing three things that require a lot of time, a lot of attention. And of course, when you're doing all those things, you can easily get burnt out when you're not, resting as much as you should, or, just doing all those things and just being on go all the time. Because I believe like the way our world is now, things just go so fast. We're all always on the go, and it's not like a bad thing, but it can be bad sometimes whenever you just keep going and you don't really take time to stop and take care of yourself. So I think burnout is definitely one I thought of, and I think it can definitely be resolved a little bit better if we just make sure we took time to rest whenever we should.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Burnout, I feel like, especially right now towards the end of the semester, I mean, we all have so much going on, and sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. And I feel like we think of that as selfish. In reality, we really do need to make sure our mental health is just as strong as every other part of us. So thank you for sharing that. So we're going to move into our next topic, which is just a continuation of this mental health topic, but it's going to be now related more towards our student athlete well-being. So to our experts, what are some mental health concerns that specifically face, or that student athletes face, that maybe our non-student athlete population may not necessarily face?
I'll take that, and thank you, Dr. Bennett. I think that's a very important question. I first want to frame it by saying that a student athlete is both a student and an athlete. And when we talk about the stresses that Dr. Petrova was talking about that affecting college students, we have to first and foremost remember that this is a real thing that's affecting our college athletes, no question about it. What makes it a little more complicated is the demands of a college athlete's schedule. Not only do they have to keep up with their academic work, but they have to have practices. They got to make sure that they take care of their body, which means going to workouts and having team meetings with coaches. That takes a lot of time that, obviously the average college student don't have to do. So I think the first and foremost is recognizing that your life is very demanding, and that alone adds to the stress and the anxiety. So that would be my first point is recognizing that your life is full, and that in order to be successful, it's imperative that you have good time management skills. And that's a whole lecture Dr. Petrova and I could do in the future, because that is so important for all college students, but I want to say it magnifies itself with that of a student athlete. Now, in addition to those type of stresses, obviously time is of essence. And what do we tend to do when we don't have a lot of time? We tend to cut back on sleep. And studies upon studies show how important sleep is to performance, whether it be academically, on the job, or certainly in your particular sport. We all know, and I love watching college athletes particularly because they have a passion for their sport. And with that passion means they want to be the very best. Some of the college athletes not only aspire to do well on the college ranks, but some of them have aspirations to go pro. That adds even more demands, extra time maybe in the weight room, extra practices, all of that stuff just compiles itself. And I also think, you know, when we're talking about college athletes, even though I was really not an athlete myself, even though I love athletics, I was in the marching band, that also takes a lot of time. And what I'm trying to say is that juggling all of these pieces in of itself will lead to a decrease in the amount of sleep. You have to fit everything in. And unfortunately, what do we tend to cut back? And that's sleep. The average college student really needs 8 to 9 hours of sleep, okay? And most of it is important that we get the full cycle, because when you talk about restorative sleep, the first half of the sleep is basically the production of growth hormone and other restorative factors, but memories are also triggered. So when you start to cut back on sleep, we tend to see decreases in memory. And I don't have to tell a college student how important memory is for academic success, but it's also important for physical success. You have to remember a playbook. You have to remember, you know, positions and plays. So, you know, memory goes throughout the entire life. And as Dr. Petrova said a lot of times too, is an athlete wants to be the very, very best. So they put a lot of extra pressure on themselves, okay? And if maybe they don't perform really well, say in a game or whatever, what does that do? It may lessen their self-esteem. And with their self-esteem, they say, well, maybe I'm not good enough. And that may lead to a little bit of depression. And don't think that these mental illnesses stop on the playing field or the court. They continue throughout our lives. So that's why it's important to emphasize a holistic approach to one's well-being and not compartmentalize every little thing, but really you're a whole, and how your mental health will affect your physical health and ultimately will affect your performance as a student athlete. So making sure you make time for yourself, managing your time as best as you possibly can. Don't cut back on sleep, and also don't cut back on diet. A lot of times we see a lot of college students, they don't have time to prepare a healthy meal. So what do? They go to the fast food store, all right, and they go get something that's high in carbohydrates. Well, carbohydrates are nice, but they also cause fluctuations in blood sugar. And when you start to see those fluctuations, what tends to happen is you may start to feel tired, fatigued, usually an hour or two after a big meal. And that can affect your academic as well as your athletic performance. So it's important that we not forget the importance of diet and how that can regulate one's moods and then one's overall athletic performance. Are you going to also talk about injury? Because that's another big piece. Everybody, of course, can get injured. I mean, that goes without saying, but I think it's magnified with a student athlete. A lot of their being in college is to perform well academically as well as athletically. And sometimes when you have an injury, what does that do? Well, you have pain associated with it. You might be out of practice for a while. What does that do to one's self-esteem? All right. And again, that you have to kind of realize that it's a transition, and everybody's response to an injury is going to be a little different. Some people, it's not a big deal. Other people may take this and really internalize it, and this become a significant factor in their overall athletic performance. So injury is a real thing, is very important. And it's not only the actual injury and the pain acutely, but let's not forget, it may require rehabilitation, may require extensive periods of time when you're not on the playing field or court. And what is that going to do to not only the student athlete, him or herself, but also the teammate and the overall performance of the team. So all of these things are multi-dimensional, and I think it's important that first and foremost that everyone be aware of it. Not only the student athlete, but also the coaches and the athletic training staff, that realizing that a lot of things may be going on in the mind of a student athlete that may not be apparent just by talking to him or her.
Yes, that's a wonderful answer. There are so many dimensions to being an athlete, and I think injury is one that sometimes gets overlooked as well, and that can have a huge impact on someone, especially because, as you said, when injury happens, every athlete goes through it differently, and you could have the same injury twice, and you go through it differently the first time than you did the second time. So being aware of how that impacts athletes is huge, especially as a coach, as a teammate, as a support staff member. So I love that you mentioned injury is very wonderful.
I also want to mention too, is for a student athlete to reach out. Like Dr. Petrova said, we have a wonderful student counseling and psychological services. We have a psychiatrist, even at student health, that can help provide free of charge our student athletes with some of the services if they're struggling. And also reach out to your coaches, to your athletic trainers, and also other teammates, because a lot of times we tend to internalize and think we're the only ones suffering through these problems, when in reality, you're not alone. So it's a good idea to reach out to others too and get some support. In more numbers, you feel less isolated, and therefore probably going to feel a little less lonely, and you might actually recover a little quicker because you realize that, hey, I'm not the only one going through this.
Exactly. So, and you just mentioned, I mean, one of the ways that students can make a difference is by reaching out. So I guess to follow up on that would be, how can institutions best support their student athletes' mental health?
I told Dr. Dollinger that I would kind of take on this question. I was actually quite excited to see it. Of course, the response is sort of multidimensional. I think, first of all, I think kind of on a smaller scale, it is important for us to, particularly in the departments that are very directly involved in the health and wellness of student athletes, for us to have experts that have an understanding and have knowledge on some of the unique experiences of student athletes. I know I hope my colleagues don't mind if I share this, but we've got two counselors on our staff who are former student athletes, and so I think that can be quite helpful, right? But I think on a broader scale, um, you know, any university, and I think certainly Dr. Dollinger and I have worked really hard and collaborated with others. It's really about the changing the culture at an institution. It used to be that and mental health was sort of seen as the responsibility of one specific department, right? And so if a student was struggling, let's send them to that specific department and they were going to fix the problem, right? We learned that it doesn't work that way, right? That it takes a village, and that the university, the institution is that village, and we're all members of that community and carry a certain responsibility. And obviously, some of us more direct responsibility in the treatment of students. But we have to implement this sort of almost, I would say, a public health approach, a very collaborative approach to mental health. It is important certainly for our two departments to work very closely with athletics and with the coaches and the teams, because oftentimes what we see is that students may not walk through the doors of our departments and offices. So we may have to visit them, or we may have to sort of join them, if you will, and sort of continue to reduce that stigma. So it's an approach that's not just focused on intervention. It's also an approach that's focused on prevention. And this is the key part. Goes back to that earlier question: why is it that college students oftentimes don't put mental health as their priority until things get rough? We work very, very hard. Several of our departments within enrollment and student affairs are focused on prevention and wellness. We want to catch things before they get too severe. We want to catch things before they get too serious. And so I would say that all of those pieces, have to be incorporated for an institution to have more of that sort of a public health model of approaching overall student mental health, and certainly the mental health of student athletes.
Wonderful, thank you. I couldn't agree more. It's about being proactive as opposed to reactive. And it's very encouraging that our institution is working together and sharing that responsibility. So I'd like to move into a question for our former student athlete, Jessica. So you spent 4 years playing volleyball here for us. Thank you for that. So what were some challenges that you went through or saw your fellow athletes go through related to their mental health?
Well, Dr. Dollinger touched on it a little bit, but one thing, I mean, anyone goes through, but specifically athletes, is the balance, because there's so many things pulling for your time in college and you want to be part of all the things. But without that balance, you'll drain yourself and then it's just kind of downhill from there. But specifically, I had a teammate that had played a year or two, and then the next year she didn't play. And you know, she could have gone so many ways with that, but she turned into the biggest cheerleader and the biggest third coach. She coached everyone in the most loving and, caring way. But as athletes, a lot of times, like being an athlete is part of our identity. And so when you lose that deserved playing time, or what you feel is deserved playing time, it really feels like you're stripped of part of you. So I think almost any athlete has experienced that at some point or another. So I think that's something really big that we can struggle with.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. Sometimes when I'm working with athletes who are going through injury, or maybe they have a different role, is having them answer the question, what's my role today? What's my role right now? How can I help my team today? And sometimes that changes daily. And so it sounds like that teammate found a really positive role when they weren't physically playing anymore.
Yeah, she did, because it's really, I can't even say that, like, it's just when you feel like, what changed from yesterday to today or whatever, and then now you're not playing. She just took the best approach to it and made the most of it, and it helped everyone. So
yeah, and you mentioned identity. As athletes, it's almost like when we grow up and we play sports for our entire lives, we do identify as an athlete. And when we lose that, or for some reason it changes, we start to question who we are. And so one of the things that I like to work with athletes on is having them define their different identities. So you are an athlete, but are you a sister? Are you a brother? Are you a sibling? Are you a daughter, a son, a child of someone? Are you involved in other hobbies? I mean, finding ways to show our athletes that they are more than just athletes. And like Dr. Dollinger said, they are students too, and they are humans, and we have to treat them as whole people. And I think what you just said was really powerful. Thank you. So Thomas, back to you as a current student athlete. So historically, we've talked about it a little bit. We talked about that stigma that goes along with mental health and seeking out mental health services. It has not been received very positively from some people, especially for men of color historically. So how can we help break the stigma that's associated with seeking mental health?
When I saw that question, it really spoke to me, just especially as we look historically, many people of color struggle with seeking help. And I think, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but, I take my own life as an example. Just growing up, it was pretty hard sometimes. I felt like it was hard to, maybe tell my parents or tell older people in my life how I felt about things. I think like whenever life would get hard or things like that, I would see my parents kind of just, tough it out and kind of, remain resilient and things like that. And like, that's not a bad thing. But I think growing up, I don't think I grew up with an environment that said, hey, you can come to me about how you feel. And I think when you live that way for so long, you really don't think about seeking help when you really need it. And so I think, the way we break that stigma now is this new generation, which I believe our new generation today is pretty vocal more about things nowadays, especially with some of the things that's happened over the past year, with political unrest and racial unrest, all of these things happening, I feel like, our new generation is very vocal about things now. And I think the way we break this stigma is just to continue to realize that it's okay to not be okay, and to voice, how we feel, and voice like when something affects us, because I think that it's really important that we start to do that now so we can stop what's happened for so many generations. Like when I look at myself, when I am a parent in the future, whenever that may be, I want to make sure that I allow my kids to have an environment where they feel comfortable to share things. And I think, when we do that, that stigma will start to it'll start to have a less and less stronghold on us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was very personal, and I very much appreciate that. And I don't mean to throw you off on a question, but I'm going to ask you something that I didn't send you. So when I did your introduction, I mentioned that you are a psychology student with a minor in sociology. Now, do you have an aspiration to get involved within this mental health field? Is that why you chose psychology? And don't feel like you have to tell me what I want to hear. So,
well, I try to make a long story short. I've been a psych major for about I became a psych major in the spring of 2020, and before that I was a nursing major. And I think, I've just always really had a heart just for helping people. I guess, never really knew exactly what it meant yet, or what it would look like specifically. And actually, the summer of 2019, I found myself in my life at a very hard place, and I sought help, and I saw the importance of it, and I saw how much it helped me. And so I think that kind of led to me wanting to get into psychology and see what I could do with that. And also, just to add a little bit on to that, I'm also a Christian. I'm also interested in biblical counseling. So I think, like, thinking about that while also being a psych major, I think like just doing those things at the same time, I definitely have grown in terms of like things I've learned about mental health. And I think that I want to further that, and maybe even possibly turn that into a career where I, reach young people, or well, people of all ages, and just try to help them realize that, like I said, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And it's okay to realize that, yes, life can be difficult. And so, yeah.
that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Sorry to put you on the spot on that one, but I found it very interesting that you were a psychology major and you were very interested in doing this panel. So I figured there may be a connection there. So thank you.
Don't worry. I wasn't thrown off. I'm good. I was ready.
Always on your toes. As an athlete, you have to be. So over this past year, there has been a lot going on, especially related to the pandemic. And so, Jessica, I know that you did graduate, so you didn't have the pandemic as a student athlete, but as an athlete, you do learn a lot about resiliency and working through challenges. So how did your time as an athlete help you handle your mental health as a healthcare provider during this last year, and I mean, still going on in this year?
Yeah. So I wasn't an athlete during COVID. I was a student for a couple months, and then I started my nursing career during the pandemic. So it was interesting. But volleyball has taught me a lot over, I think I played 10 years, especially about resiliency. When I was in high school, there was a year I worked so hard and we were practicing all the time, and I almost never got any playing time, back to the playing time thing. And, I was so defeated, and I could have just easily given up and said, this isn't for me, but that was a hit to my pride that year, but I just kept playing. And the next year I played for another team, and I just kept playing each year. And then eventually got me a scholarship to play in college. And then once I came to college, then I had a lot of things, again, with the balance vying for my time, that I wanted to do volleyball and nursing school and church involvement and friendships and all of that. But I wanted all those things. And so I found kind of a way to make all those balance and work. And so related to work, there are obviously some really hard days. And there are days that I do feel like I want to give up, but I know my patients can't have me give up because I'm in a trauma ICU. So they're probably in the hardest, probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest times in their lives. So for me, it's been, and this is what I tell people too, like the most important thing in my opinion is to have a good support group, because people will be with you through the good and the bad. And with the hard days, I have people that I can tell about, or just that will just listen or give me feedback or anything. So I think volleyball has taught me so much and has allowed me to pursue this job, and which who would have thought those would ever really be connected, but yeah, it's taught me a lot and really has allowed me to be where I'm at.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, being on a team, if I think about volleyball being a team sport, I think about nursing and the people that you work with in that trauma ICU is such a team aspect. I mean, you've got to trust each other and be able to depend on each other, and it sounds like you have found a place that really supports that also.
Yeah, and if I, you know, even my friends that are nurses that don't work in my unit, I can tell them so much, but they're not really going to understand. So it's nice to have them, but at the same time, having good coworkers or people that are going through the same experiences or feeling similar emotions to you has been really great too.
Yeah, that support system, I echo that so heavily. It's so important. Thank you for sharing that. So Thomas, I'm gonna go back to you on this next question. So how has the pandemic impacted your mental health as a student athlete? And how do you think it's impacted other collegiate athletes around the country?
I think the way it impacted me, I probably feel like it is synonymous with how it affected many people around the world. And I think at first it was pretty shocking, just to think about how fast life changed, you know, having to, you know, wear masks and having to socially distance. Like obviously, like I know we've all gotten used to it now, but it was pretty hard, especially for me, because I'm a very social person and a very like I like to be with people. I like to be out with people. And the minute, you know, everything is closed down and stuff, and then you can barely see people's face when you talk to them, like little things like that, you know, it was kind of hard for me. I mean, if I be real about it. But I will say the biggest thing that the pandemic did help me do is to spend some time with myself. I saw that, like, yes, I love to hang around people a lot, but I think that I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with myself. And I think in this time where I've spent a lot of time with myself, I've been able to take better care of my mental health. I've been able to realize, you know, what might trigger me on a daily basis. Like these past few months of my life, I feel so different. Like I feel like I'm so aware of what goes on around me and how it affects me. And I think that if COVID didn't happen, I probably wouldn't have got to this point, because now I've just spent so much time just really, you know, just reflecting on things that have happened in my life, and now realizing that I need to be more aware of what's going on around me. And so I think that that's probably been a lot of people's case. You know, when COVID happened, they've had more time to themselves, had more time at home. And I think that it's probably helped them to be more in tune with their emotions and things like that. But I do believe that, yes, it was still hard. And this pandemic is something you can't just brush off. You know, you can't just, this doesn't happen and it doesn't affect you for the rest of your life. So I just hope that, you know, along like me and, you know, everybody else, that we just continue to remain emotionally healthy.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a really great point about learning about yourself. It's a great time to really figure out who you are, and a lot of self-awareness activities that you can do during that time frame that really help you learn about, you know, who you are as a person, and you know how to take care of yourself. I think that you said something really important about how it impacted you. You wanted to be social, like you're a social person, and I think a lot of us who like to be out with people, like to interact with people, that did take a toll on people's mental health. Because when you're used to being around people, you're used to socializing, you're used to interacting. When that goes away, it does force you to take some time to yourself. And I think that looking back on it, if people are real honest, it was probably a real big benefit for some people learning about themselves. So thank you for that. So back to our experts. So what are some common struggles that you've seen student athletes work through, specifically during this past year related to being an athlete during the pandemic?
Okay, I'll jump in on this. First of all, I want to comment on both Jessica and Thomas's excellent responses. I just want to go back a little bit that throughout life, you're going to have obstacles in your way. And I think being a student athlete prepares you maybe better than the average college student on how to tackle those obstacles and become more aware of yourself. Thomas, you were spot on. And Jessica, what you said about being a team member. I mean, the medical field nowadays more than ever, and COVID has brought this out, I think, intensified it 100 times over, how important we rely on one another. And, you know, to be a teammate in a sport, you rely on each other. You know, your wins and losses are not, unless you're playing golf, maybe, aren't dependent on yourself. They're dependent on your team. And, you know, you're only as good as the weakest link on your team. So I think it's important that you build each other up during these difficult times of adversity and learn how to deal with obstacles. It's going to carry you so far, no matter what field you go into. And you just gave a brilliant example in the nursing field. And I know my experience working with medical students, you know, in different institutions, including here, is we love admitting medical student athletes into the medical school because we know that they are able to handle time very well and they can understand, you know, how difficult life can be. The things don't always go your way. You don't win every game, but you learn from each one and you become more self-aware, like Thomas was saying about yourself. So I think those are two excellent take-home messages that you said. Now, to go to COVID, this is, I'm sure you heard this a zillion times, we've never been through anything like this in over 100 years, the last pandemic of 1918. So we were, you know, you got to understand this has been a novel virus. We've learned so much in the last year. And I know probably the biggest struggle that all of us face is the uncertainty. All right, you're told one thing and next week it's completely different. You wear a mask, now you don't wear a mask, or you wear 2 masks, or, you know, and as far as what treatments are concerned and how far social distancing, it was 6 feet. Now, you know, you read the latest literature, it's 3 feet. And there's a reason for that. We're not trying to confuse the public, but you know, we're learning more and more about the virus. And I think that's really where I think we need to start our conversation. This is something none of us expected. It came suddenly and we had to pivot quickly. With regard again to the student plus the athlete. First of all, every student had to suddenly go from an in-person social type of classroom to an online virtual learning. Some students thrive, you know, they enjoy the virtual world, but other people, and I suspect Thomas, the way you describe yourself, probably found it a little more difficult, you know, where you like to have the interaction. So the first struggle I've seen with students in general and student athletes probably in particular is the fact that now we're learning virtually. And the other thing too is student athletes have been tested so many more times. I'm sure you all would agree. The average student may not even gotten tested unless they were exposed or had symptoms, but the student athlete was subjected to many, many tests. And each time you do a test, you don't know what the results are. You know, the vast majority, 40 to 50% of all patients with COVID are asymptomatic. So you don't even know if you were exposed unless you get tested. So number one, the uncertainty of what is the test result going to be? Now, not only for myself, but the rest of the team. You know, are we going to have enough players to even play this week? Okay. So that leads to a lot of uncertainty. Here you are going, practicing, doing all the workouts and everything you need to prepare for your next opponent. And then all of a sudden, the day before the contest, you learn that, oh, I can't play, or oh, half the team can't play. So that has to lay the uncertainty and the disruption. And it's not just your sport or your teammates, but that leads to your rest of your life, your social life, your academic life. Here you are preparing, you think, oh, you know, we're going to play, and then all of a sudden you don't, and then what? And also a lot of the student athletes particularly live on campus. So now you have the person that, well, maybe you don't have COVID, but you were exposed to a roommate or a teammate that had COVID. So that, what does that do? And we had a lot of students and undeniably concerned that, you know, they were just exposed. Why do I need to be out 14 days and somebody else who had COVID, diagnosed COVID on the test, is only out 10 days in isolation? You know, so all of those things play a role, and I'm sure over the course of time, we've all gotten a lot better in dealing with some of those things. But let's be honest, it was a year of uncertainty across the board, and every student athlete across this country has dealt with it. And I commend all of you for dealing with it as well as you actually did. I think that's the take-home message, is give yourselves a pat on the back, because I think a lot of people would not have handled it even as well as you all did. All right, so the fact of quarantine and isolation, canceled games, the uncertainty, not to mention the fact that now all your academic work is online and virtual, I think were the biggest struggles that I saw this year, particularly with student athletes.
I'm going to quickly jump in, Bob. I hope you don't mind.
Yes.
I think there's no really better way to say it. I know that, so both Dr. Dollinger and I serve on the care team at Augusta University, which is a multidisciplinary team of professionals. And oftentimes we review care concerns that are submitted by either students or faculty or staff who are concerned about another student. And unlike other years, I mean, this year we got significantly more care reports on academic concerns. So, I mean, obviously, Thomas, as you shared, I mean, I sort of feel like a tornado doesn't really describe it in terms of sort of how fast it hit us and how quickly we really had to adapt to working, learning, taking exams remotely, and then coming back the following semester to classes being either predominantly virtual or entirely virtual. I've sort of reflected myself on it in terms of if I were a student during this pandemic, what would my learning be like? How would I be impacted? I'm one of those people, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I kind of like the classroom and I like kind of hands-on stuff. And so who knows? I think I probably would have struggled with the virtual stuff. But sort of the flip side of it too is Bob, you mentioned this, is in the midst of all of the ambiguity that I think to an extent continues, and it's obvious it's been enormously impactful on our student athletes. I feel like in my life, in my personal life, I've also never seen more resiliency in terms of what our students have had to adapt to. I mean, golly, they've had to adapt to telehealth and telemental health services and virtual learning and doing these types of events online, and a lot of creativity. And Thomas, I hear you. I think for extroverts, this has been a tough period of time. I empathize with that as an introvert. So for me, it's not been as difficult as I think it has been for extroverts. But overall, I think we have yet to see, I know there's been a lot out there on the difficulties and the burnout and COVID anxiety, right? Are we ever going to go back to not doing any of the safety behaviors the way we've been sort of doing them in the past year? But I think, I hope that we're also going to encounter hopefully there's going to be people that are going to write books out there, Thomas, like you were saying, where they're reflecting on what did I learn about myself in this past year. I think we've learned a lot about ourselves, and I encourage everyone in our event today to think about what have been some things that have just helped me really become even more resilient, because I am sure you're gonna find a lot of things. And so I oftentimes don't think about that even in my line of work, because we think about all the negative stuff that's been going on, but I think there's been some opportunities that have emerged out of this as well. So that's where I'll end.
Wonderful. Thank you for that addition. I think that was really important to mention. So we're going to move into our last segment, which is strategies for student athletes to assist their mental health. And at this time, I also want to let people know that we will be doing a short question and answer portion. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. It should be at the bottom of your screen. And even if you come up as Dr. Hannah Bennett, as you put yours in, that's not a problem. We will still be able to see it and read it. And also at this time, I'd like to recognize our athletic director, Coach Clint Bryan. Thank you for being here. We are glad to have you with us. So for Dr. Dollinger, or Dr. Petrova, what are some strategies that student athletes can employ to protect their mental health?
Okay, we're both going to answer the question. I think the most important thing in any issue regarding the health, whether it be physical health or mental health, is that of prevention. All right, early recognition, I think, is really the key. All right, don't wait, because a lot of times if you wait, symptoms may persist and get worse. So I think, learning, again, this is where Thomas, you were spot on as far as self-awareness, is also the resilience, but also knowing your body, knowing the limits of your body, knowing what it feels like to feel good. And when you start to feel more fatigued, sluggish, your performance starts to slacken, you have no reason why, then it's time to start to think about what are some things maybe I'm doing wrong, or maybe there's some things I need to change in my lifestyle that will overall help protect me moving forward in my overall health. And I don't like to compartmentalize physical and mental and spiritual and all the different health, because we're all one person. But I think when we're looking at physical health, the ways to prevent, number one, is make sure you get adequate rest, particularly for a student athlete. It's more important maybe than the average person. Your commodity is your bodies. Your bodies can do amazing things that the average person cannot do. And by protecting your body and making sure you're getting adequate sleep, you're putting the right foods and diet together, and you're building muscle, and you're building ways that you can enhance your overall performance, I think are probably the two biggest things that student athletes really should not ever lose sight on. That is extremely important, is good dietary habits as well as adequate sleep habits, and recognizing early warning signs, making sure you get adequate checkups, okay? Making sure that you're immunized. All right. Again, it's not required or mandatory, at least not yet, by the USG and Augusta University. But this is a great opportunity to make sure that you and your loved ones are vaccinated for COVID. Because if we're going to get out of this pandemic, we need herd immunity. And one way of protecting one's health and one strategy is to make sure you feel more comfortable. I've spoken to many, many people after they got their second dose of COVID vaccine. They feel a little bit of relief, that maybe life is starting to slowly get back to normal. And that can improve your overall mental health and well-being, is optimism. If you feel that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to perform better. You're going to feel like there's a reason that I'm doing all of this. I know, when you're in a program, you start to wonder, what's all this going to do for me? And recognizing that you've been through probably the most difficult year, and hopefully your most difficult year you'll ever have in your life, and you've done it very, very well. And recognizing that protecting your health in so many ways is going to make you so much more resilient for the next obstacle that comes along.
I don't know that I could have said it much better. All I'm going to do is just add a little bit. Going back to that prevention piece that Dr. Dollinger mentioned. So many times throughout my careers, I've heard students say that when they've recognized some of those initial signs of a sort of burnout or stress, such as irritability, fatigue, not wanting to be around others, increased or decreased sleep, increased or decreased appetite, not being able to concentrate and focus. Oftentimes they'll say, if I just wait long enough, they're going to go away. And the challenging piece is that I wish that happened, and I wish that was the case, but it just doesn't happen like that. Our bodies they're just absolute wonders, and there are vehicles through life, but they know how to communicate with us when something's off and we're out of balance. And so that's why I say, reach out. We don't have to suffer and struggle alone. And sometimes we feel like we do. And sometimes we're not able to go to family or to friends. And so reach out to people that care about you on campus, whether that's, your friends, whether that's your coach, your playmates, whether that's those of us that work at the respective departments of student counseling and student health, before things get really bad. It's so much easier to sort of work and try to sort of, whether we're talking about anxiety or depression or disordered eating or substance use concerns. It's so much easier when we tackle those things when it's kind of early on in their progression. And so that's what I would encourage. I mean, any student athlete that's on at our event tonight is to just not ignore the signs and signals. And sometimes, yeah, we need that to spend that time with ourselves and slow down in order to sort of recognize and not ignore them. So that's what I'll add.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really love the idea of being proactive and really pushing that idea of prevention. I think about an unopened soda bottle that you drop multiple times, and then it's like keeping it bottled in. And then once you open it, it just explodes. But when we think about prevention and seeking out help when we recognize those signs, I think is so, so important. So thank you. So Thomas, what are some things you have done to improve your own mental health, especially with all the roles that you juggle as a student athlete?
Dr. Dollinger already used one of my R words, so I have to come up with another R word. So I can't say rest. He already said that, so I'm going to say recharge. I've learned the importance of recharging. Even though I'm a very extroverted person, one of my best friends, who's an introvert, he helped me realize the importance of recharging. You know, just because you're an extrovert doesn't mean that, you know, when you're with people all the time, that you can just come home and, you know, still get things done. Sometimes you need to recharge and spend some time with yourself. And because one thing I have struggled with in my life is like being around people and kind of like doing what everybody else wants to do. Like if I'm with a crowd of people, I kind of just, yeah, I have fun. Like I'll do whatever I want to do with them, like whatever they want to do. And sometimes I think I would get too caught up in that and I wouldn't really know like what I wanted to do or what I thought was fun and things like that. And I've realized the importance of doing things that make you happy and things that kind of that uplift you. And, you know, on to a practical thing that I do is, you know, every week, you know, whether it's Friday or Saturday, I just take those days to rest. And I spend those days doing things that, you know, make me happy. I think that sometimes we can get down and depressed. And I think one thing that contributes to that is that sometimes we're not doing enough things that we like to do. You know, we're kind of, whether it be like our jobs, because I know at one point I worked at Walmart and it was pretty stressful. And I just found like myself just in a time where I was doing a lot of things that I didn't really like and things that were bad for my mental health. And I think that it's important to, you know, kind of find some things that help you feel better, you know, just taking care of yourself and keeping your spirits up, just like Dr. Dollinger said, you know, being optimistic and doing a lot of positive things because they do go a long way, you know. And another thing that I also do is I've also learned the importance of time management and especially, you know, juggling a lot of things. One thing that happens to me is I forget things a lot, but time management has helped me really like remember things and keep up with all the tasks that I have to do. And so, yeah, those are just a few practical things that I've learned.
I really love that you mentioned recharging. I tend to equate that to a cell phone battery. So many students are connected to their cell phone, and can you only imagine if they didn't recharge their battery? And I mean, that's very much like us as people. We need that time to recharge. So I love that. I love that R word. Good, good change from rest. Recharge is a wonderful one. So with Jessica, what words of advice would you have for our student athletes related to their mental health?
So the first part kind of echoes what everyone has said, but I just said to find an emotional outlet or something that feeds you. And for me, like I love to be outside, be with other people, work out. So just find whatever it is for you that you can kind of let go from everything. And also this was something I saw through my years and felt is that remind yourself that a 4-year sport, specifically for the student athletes, doesn't define you. Or your future really, unless you're going to play professionally or something. But and it's really hard to remember because I mean I had days like sitting on the bus after a game thinking forever about oh, that play, and if I had a bad game or we lost or whatever. But really the relationships you build and working towards your career and everything else that you're doing during college, that will last a whole lot longer than the outcome of a game or your stats for a game. And I learned a lot during volleyball and during college. And that has taught me things that I'm still using, but no stat or win or loss or championship even is defining me today. So I think that can be really hard to get caught up in. And I'm saying that from like now being out of college, but when you're in it, in the middle of it, it's really hard to remember that, especially if it's part of your identity and all of that. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I really love the hobby suggestion, like finding something outside of your sport that really makes you happy, fills your cup. And it's going to look different for everyone. And I think that that's something when we look at hobbies, it should be something that makes you happy. And that really goes to what you said, Thomas, about, going with the flow and kind of not finding what made you fulfilled. So I think those are wonderful suggestions. And so, Doctors Donger and Petrova, if you see a fellow student athlete or even a non-student athlete really struggling with their mental health, what can and should we do for them if we know them, if we're friends with them, or even if we're, like myself as their professor? What are some things that we can do for them?
I'll take this question, Hannah. I would say the simplest answer is talk to them. I think we live in a time and an age where sort of communication looks very different. We're very much attached to technology, but we don't always engage in, and I think this year particularly has been really challenging, right? In sort of verbal conversation where we're just really curious to hear about what a person has to say. And so to me, I think it goes back to that most individuals who are struggling, even when it's hard for them to express themselves, because sometimes when we struggle, it's hard to find the words to sort of describe what goes on for us. I think it's important to take the time um, just to ask questions. How are you doing? What has been going on for you? I've noticed some things about you that uh, are just different, and I've just thought about you. I really care about you, and just wanted to reach out and ask how things have been, and um, listen carefully. Help them get connected to resources, obviously, right? I always say I mean, not me, obviously, but others who aren't mental health providers and mental health counselors don't have to be, right? And so I think oftentimes what sort of stops us from saying something or reaching out is the worry or the concern that we may offend that person, or we're sort of infringing on their privacy, right? I mean, we value that a lot in our culture, right? But it's precisely that outreach that at times can truly make a difference for people. I don't know if any of the students who are have joined today have had the opportunity. We have been offering QPR, question, persuade, refer, suicide prevention trainings on campus since 2016. In addition to that, we are offering some additional trainings, and you all may have heard of them. One of them is mental health first aid training, and then another one is it's sort of a virtual module for suicide prevention created by a company called Cognito. And all of these three are and will be available to students, faculty, and staff to take, and sort of hopefully to get equipped with some communication skills in knowing how to talk to someone who may be struggling, whether that's a family member, whether that's a sort of a fellow classmate, whether that's a teammate, whoever that may be. So I know that we all don't, these trainings are really specifically created for non-mental health providers. And so I just encourage everyone who is in our event today and who is part of Augusta University, or even whichever institution you belong to, if they're offering these training opportunities, to sign up for one. I mean, they're as short as 45 minutes, and as long as the mental health first aid is, I think, maybe 8-hour training. So But I'm going to go back to the original question, Hannah, and that is, do an outreach, talk to them, offer some, be familiar with the resources around you so that you can offer that information to that person that you're talking to. And I mean, it can make an enormous difference. And that's what I've learned in my career. I'm working in collegiate mental health. We've had so many referrals from fellow students, from students. When we look at our data at student counseling and psychological services, the highest numbers in terms of who referred that student to the counseling center is a friend. It's not a faculty. Of course, we've got lots of faculty members who do, lots of staff, the coaches, obviously, but it's a friend. And so don't forget that.
That's excellent, Dr. Petrova. Actually, I want to underscore that. I think we all have a role to play, that if we see a fellow teammate that is struggling, whether it be behavior, maybe the performance is slacking, maybe they're not into working out like they used to, maybe they're always late, their appearance maybe isn't quite as sharp, anything that may be of concern, I urge all of you to, you don't have to be psychologists or psychiatrists. Just reach out, like Dr. Petrova said. That's the most important thing you can do, is be there for that person and refer them to all the different resources. And also the many trainings, particularly I think the student athletes would really get a lot out of the Cognito training. It's virtual. It's something that it can be done within 45 minutes. And I think it will at least give the framework of what you can do as a fellow teammate and fellow student athlete, and also for coaches and athletic trainers that maybe see something that a teammate may or may not. But like Dr. Petrova said, the number one reason people refer is concern of a friend. So again, I urge all of you as teammates of each other is to really reach out. If you see somebody struggling, just ask how things are going. And sometimes that's all it would be, is just to get the conversation started. So I want to emphasize that, because I think if there's a take-home message of tonight, is that's it. There's services, resources out there for you. Reach out if you need some help, and don't do it alone, because there's so many people here that want to help you, that are committed to help you. And upperclassmen that may have been struggling. That's the other thing, is mentorship. One of the nice things of being a student athlete is you've got seniors that have been 3 years into the program. Jessica has completed the program. I mean, what great mentors is learn from others who have been there already. No need reinventing the wheel. So reach out to people that you trust, that are role models, that are mentors. I think that will really be a good first step.
That is, both of you give such wonderful answers, and I'm very thrilled that you mentioned the resources that we have here at AU. So those of you that are on the call that were unaware of those, I think now you can write those down and go visit those sites and figure out which might be best for you. And I love that we have those here at the institution. I think it's very wonderful in terms of helping with that prevention.
Or just contact our departments and we will pack you with information. It's on our website, or we're happy to talk to you as well. So just call us.
Absolutely, we love to talk.
Yes, that is wonderful. And I'm so thrilled that both of you were able to join us today, because I feel like it speaks a lot about our institution that two directors of very important entities in our institution are very committed to our students and their mental health. And I fully appreciate both of you for being here tonight. With that, we are out of our panel questions. And at this time, I would welcome either any panelists to mention anything that we didn't get a chance to cover, or welcome any questions that the audience may have. At the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button, or if you prefer, you can put it in the chat. That will go to all of the panelists. And I am seeing a couple comments from some of our attendees. So Dr. Moore said, thank you for sharing about burnout, Thomas, when you mentioned burnout earlier. It is very difficult to manage all of those roles. And even as non-student athletes, you were right, we have so many things to juggle, and burnout, especially right now towards the end of the semester, can be a real struggle for individuals. And Dr. Alderman is part of our athletics committee for the faculty senate. So I appreciate you being here, and those of you that are also part of that, thank you for supporting this this event. And she writes, take time to take care of yourself, even if it is for a few minutes a day. Take some deep breaths, write in a journal, take a walk, take a bubble bath or a long shower, read a book, whatever makes you feel good. And I really think that echoes the sentiment that both Thomas and Jessica said about doing things that you love to do, that fill you up and make you feel good. And it's going to look different for everyone. So hopefully we can find things that bring us all joy.
Hey, Dr. Bennett, also, we're going to have Coach Clem Bryan come on because we're going to have a couple giveaways.
Oh, wonderful.
And he can tell the attendees what they'll be getting once they complete a survey. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste the link for the survey in the chat. So go ahead and fill it out. And Coach Bryan, you can let them know exactly what we're raffling off today.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully all you guys can hear me. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Hannah Bennett for a tremendous job of putting this town hall together and being such a leader in mental health. We at Augusta University, we strive to be a national model of excellence for intercollegiate athletics and the mental health issue. We are taking this very, very seriously. We want to not let this be a one and done, but something that we're going to continue on. We're starting a mental health task force in intercollegiate athletics, and you guys are making this happen. I'm so proud of Jessica, you, and of course Thomas. Thomas is participating in the Peach Belt Conference tournament down in Daytona Beach right now, so he's still balancing things. And thank you for being here. And Jessica is a reason that our volleyball team is where it is today. And I don't mind saying that. She I met her when she was a little freshman coming from St. Louis and watched her develop as freshman of the year and an all conference player. But one of the reasons we've won 3 PBC championships is because she set an example at a very high level as being a great student. And thank you for that, Jessica. Dr. Justin Moore, who's one of our members of the 100 Black Men, epidemiologist in AAU Health, he's the reason that we have this tonight. On behalf of the 100 Black Men and the grant that we got from Morehouse School of Medicine, we are able to do this, and we'll continue to do this. And guys, let me tell you, this is an important issue. I've been in intercollegiate athletics all my adult life. I've been on a college campus since I left home at 18 years old, and I've seen more issues of mental health issues affecting student athletes and students over the last 5 years than I've seen in any of the years before that. So this is a serious issue. I just was talking to an NBA team yesterday, and they got a very good player right now who's been around a while, but has struggled in the NBA, but is playing really well. And the reason he's playing well is because he's come to grasp with his mental health issues. So this is serious. And I think we invited all the other Peach Belt Conference student athletes to be a part of this, along with the student athletes at Allen University and Benedict and Savannah State University, because we've been serving as a mentor to them in the NCAA process. What we're going to give tonight, if you guys fill out the survey, we're going to give 6 $50 Visa gift cards to you. So we're going to let you know who those are. And again, guys, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know we had over 100 attendees tonight. And like I said, this won't be the first thing. We'll continue to build this and to grow this, because I know we got great things coming for AU. And Dr. Dollinger's been around a long time. He's seen a lot of student athletes over his years. And I spent some time at the University of Miami, so I know exactly where he's been and what he's been going through. So, guys, thank you again, Dr. Bennett. I'm going to see who are those names. Have we gotten the names yet there, Mr. Frazier?
No, they're still filling them out. So we'll give
them out.
Yep, we'll give the panelists a chance to say some last words, and by the time they finish, then we should have everyone in.
Okay, thank you so very much. Back to you, Dr. Hannah.
Thanks, Coach. Really appreciate that. This was a pleasure to put on, and I really want to commend both Jessica and Thomas for joining us as well. I'm very thrilled that both of you wanted to be part of this. I think the perspective of athletes should not go overlooked when we're talking about how to best serve them, because you both know best what it's like to go through all of this. So thank you both for being here. Really, really appreciate that. And hopefully the student athletes that have joined us can look at you both as examples of individuals who really support this initiative and really understand how important it is that we are there for our student athletes, not just physically, but holistically as the whole person, because you are humans first. And that is our priority, is to make sure that we are producing wonderful, safe, healthy humans as you leave our institution. So thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Mr. President, would you like to say anything as we conclude our event?
Well, like I said before, I'd just like to thank everybody for participating in the town hall meeting. You guys did a very good job. The information was very informative. And it's just amazing that we have put mental health on the back burner for so long, but now that, it's coming out, and it's a very good thing. And we hope that we can continue to, like Clint said, continue to put on these town hall meetings to help our athletes and help everybody in the community, in the CSRA community. So thanks again.
I also would like to thank everybody, Dr. Bennett, and Dr. Moore, and particularly our two students, Jessica and Thomas. I think, you're an inspiration for all of the student athletes we have here, role models, and something that I think we all can, I know I learned a lot just listening to the things that you've said. So again, I think this is excellent, Coach. I think if we can continue to have a regular series of this, because this shouldn't be a one and done. I mean, this is an evolving issue. And the 30 plus years I've been here, I've seen much increase in the number of students that present with mental health issues, not only the number, but also the severity. So this is such a timely and such an important topic that I hope we continue to increase the number of offerings we offer to the students. So again, I applaud all of you for putting this together, and I'm honored to have been one of your panelists tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. It was great.
Thank y'all for having me. I really enjoyed this.
I'm just going to quickly say that I, similarly to Jessica and Thomas and my other colleagues, I'm absolutely, again, honored to be at this event, and I'm amazed at the turnout and the number of attendees that we've had. I can't even remember when the last time, was the last time when I was able to be a part of this sort of a large of an event in terms of attendees. I think what that tells me is that many have chosen to sort of spend this time here tonight, and they could have spent it elsewhere. And they've decided to hopefully spend it, I think of it as self-care. And this was maybe an hour or an hour and a half of self-care. And so thank you all.
So Coach, are we going to do the giveaway, or we're doing that before we end, correct?
Yeah, we're going to do the giveaway before we end. I'm just waiting on the names right now. I should have them in just a couple of minutes. Just give me one moment. I'll be right back.
No problem.
And Thomas, good luck to you and your teammates this weekend at the competition in Daytona. Go Jags!
Yes, I'm loving it out here. I last time I was in Daytona Beach, I was like 2 years old, and all I remember is I lost a sandal out on the beach. So
wow.
Hopefully, yeah, just come out here. I'm just glad that I love the beach. I'm just glad to be here, to be honest. But yeah, I think us Jags, we're gonna do what we can.
Great.
Run real fast. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Florida native, born and raised, went to the U. Of course, it wasn't called the U back then, but University of Miami. And so I have a lot of beach days. So good luck to you there.
And actually,
Thank you.
as we're waiting for these, the names, we can recognize the volleyball team. Also, they won their conference tournament. They went down to Flagler and won in 5 sets. So that's very, very wonderful. Congratulations to those athletes.
Congratulations, great.
So I guess as we continue to wait, Thomas, what events are you participating in?
I'm about to do the 4x1, the 100, and the 200.
Are you feeling prepared? Feeling good about it?
Yes, I feel very great about it. I definitely enjoy sprinting a lot. I've never been a distance person ever. Yeah, the farthest you'll see me run is probably a 400, and after that, I don't do any distance. So, yeah.
I feel like I'm in the same boat as you. I will not be running any further than a 400, even if
Yeah.
it's necessary to run that 400. So I can appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I give a lot of props to our cross country people. They go out and kill it too. I'm like, I don't know how they do it.
I again agree with that. It takes a lot to run long distance, and kudos to all of you on here who do that, even just for fun as well, because that's a lot of stamina that you have to have, an endurance to run a lot longer than 400 meters.
Yeah.
Coach got the names. Here are the names. Isabella Fernandez, Kelsey Parks, Chloe Wilson, Tyree Myers, Whitney Watkins, David Hedrick. Again, David Hedrick, Whitney Watkins, Tyree Myers, Chloe Wilson, Kelsey Parks, and Isabella Fernandez. Okay, you guys have all won your $50 Visa gift certificate, and we'll be getting them to you. Your email addresses and name, we'll call you, and then we'll get those to you. I'll probably just have them give them to me in the office, and then we'll give them to your coaches, and we will get those to you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Hannah, for an exceptional job, guys. Way to go. Be very proud of yourself. And again, Dr. Bennett, Dr. Dolinger, and Dr. Petrova, thank you so very much for your participation. And we look forward to working with you in the future. You guys have a good night, and thank you.